around with my head held high. I'm walking around with my head held high. You know why? You know why? My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. They on the other side. I'm walking around with my head held high. I'm walking around with my head held high. You know why? You know why? My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. My dreams are reach. I can see those lights.
Welcome to Would You Marry You, where we have candid conversations about what we are bringing to the table. I am your host, and today we are going to have an amazing conversation on the topic of know your worth, dealing with daddy issues. But first, I would like to welcome our guests, Karen Bolden and Sarah Grace. We are so glad that you are here to join us on today.
Glad to be here.
Blessing to be here.
Yes,
Awesome,
it is.
awesome. So Karen, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I've been in ministry for years, and first of all, I am the daughter of the Most High God, and I got saved when I was 22 years old, so that was 20-something years ago. I love this walk, and for the last umpteen years, I've been used by God to break generational cycles of oppression and teaching people who they really are in Christ and helping them to find out what their true purpose is in life. And so I've loved it, and we're continuing to do things and adding on different resources to be able to take that a little bit further.
Awesome. Exciting. Well, Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, we have a similar story because I gave my life to Christ at 21, and it's been about 23 years since then, and I entered into a complete state of transformation that has continued on for all these 23 years. And in the process of that, I've shared that transformative process through books, preaching, speaking, pioneering, ministries, television, anything and everything I can do to share what God has done for me with others. And so that's why we're here today.
Yes, it's super exciting. So ladies, let's just jump right into this topic when we talk about knowing your worth and understanding that sometimes our fathers, our daddy is the one that gives us that affirmation and teaches us about our values so we know to not allow abnormal use or abuse in that process, right? So just for kicks and giggles, when did you realize your real worth?
Whew.
There's the giggles.
There's the giggles. I don't know about the kicking, but
you want to go first, Sarah?
You know, I'm still working on it, but I would tell you that I've had levels of revelation about my worth over time, where maybe if you took me back 23 years, I didn't think that I deserved to be alive. Then maybe 10 years after that, I'm like, yeah, I deserve to be here. You know, God has a grace and a purpose for me, but maybe I allowed a lot of behaviors in my life and in my circle that really didn't show that I valued myself. So at this point, at 43 years old, I have more value than I've ever had, but I think God is still working on me. I do think so.
Yeah, I think that's great to think about, to realize that He's still working on us. Like we are truly a work continuing to progress as we go on. Yeah. So what about you?
I like that, you know, that He's continuing to work on us because it was an overall process. I mean, literally, you know, when you start to think about what happened in childhood and how you God, you know, walked us through that process or what have you. It's broad. I began to know my worth. I would say maybe about the last 7 years, honestly, to be honest. And I'm 49. I'll be 50 next year. Yeah. It's about I would say last 7 years, you know, went through some things or what have you, but then God really began to deal with me about purpose, you know, and he really began to deal with me about how there's such a strong spirit of oppression in the earth that would cause us to not find out who we really are, you know, and the strategic of the enemy or what have you. But once the Lord began to open up my eyes in that area, and He had sent me on a 40-day no food fast. I had never done it before, but we got through that thing, and it was in the midst of that fast that He began to show me, you know, that strong spirit of oppression, and I'm like, oh my God, and He was saying, you know, you're oppressed, and I'm like, you know how we get, you're like, wait, what are you talking about? You know, I'm helping people and I'm doing this and that, but He said no. He said, because you living paycheck to paycheck, and He said, and I put so much in you. He said, there's so much worth in you. There's so much vision in you. He said, what are you doing with it? You know, because oftentimes as women, especially, we spend so much time, you know, trying to, you know, make other people better and pull things out of other people. But God said, what about you? You know, so it was from that moment that time of fasting, and the Lord really began to minister to me on who I really am. And so from there, just been building or what have you. And each season, he just, pouring out revelation and revelation. And so I'm excited about it because this is now, we've embarked upon a time and a season where we're starting to see the manifestation of everything that he promised. Those things, those prophecies, those things we've been waiting on for years, those things that deep down on the inside, you're like, I know God said, we're in that moment of time where those things are starting to happen. And so when you see that, it's like, oh my God, I'm walking in purpose. You know what I'm saying? So it hasn't been long, but it's happening just like that. So,
and I think that's what's so beautiful about having that type of relationship with God. It's not about religion; it's about the relationship that we have with Him.
Yes.
Because when we step into that space of the relationship, now we can really truly become who we are, and then once we become who we are, we relate to other people differently as well.
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about this whole subject of would you marry you, and we step into that, and when we don't know who we are and we don't understand our true value, we sometimes get into relationships that allow us to accept behavior that is not consistent with who we are and our values.
That's so good.
Yeah. So have you seen that happen in your life at all?
Time again.
Yeah.
It has. And I probably didn't even really start catching it until my 40s. Because it's not even just, we always assume we're talking about romantic relationships.
Correct.
But it can be in business, it can be in ministry, anywhere where you're relating to people and you find yourself, and here's the thing, there's grace for challenging people, extra grace required people. But there is something different when you're dealing with people that disrespect you because you don't know who you are.
Yes.
And even there's times God has spoke to me where I'm like, well, God, you need to work on that. You need to fix this. And Sarah, stand up for yourself.
Yes.
Sarah, set a line for yourself. You want me to change all these people to respect you. Respect yourself.
That's good.
And have boundaries. You can be gracious and love people and have boundaries. But I have definitely had to fall in that area many times and ask God, well, how did I get here where I'm depressed or broken or hurt? Well, who are they? Do you know that God, I don't want to get preachy on your program now, but do you know that God, He doesn't like it when we elevate anybody above Him?
Oh, believe me.
so
Yes,
true.
you're right.
Like I can say that He's been compassionate with me, even when I mess up and He has to heal me from the mistakes I've made. But I've seen where it's like, in prayer, He'll almost propose a question to me in my spirit, like, who are they, Sarah, to have that much power over who you think you are?
Right.
So
And He
good.
wants total dependence, that all of our sense of value comes from Him. But don't let me jump ahead, because I know we're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so powerful though, because but there again, it goes back to that relationship, right? Until we have that relationship where we can hear His voice for ourselves, then we're allowing the voices of everything else and everyone else to tell us what our value is. And I mean, my thing, I got really caught up in the forgiveness. Oh, I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to forgive them. And it's great to forgive. Don't by any chance hear what I'm not saying.
Right.
But without accountability, grace without accountability still leads to chaos.
Yes.
And it still leads to abuse. It still leads to a level of toxicity that it takes us years. Sometimes some people never really recover from those types of behaviors that they've experienced. But thanks be to God, we do have a way of escape. We have that way that we can go to the Father and we can say, okay, my biological father might not have been everything I needed. My biological father may have set a different standard for me than what you see. But Lord, what is it that you see in me?
Yeah.
And how is it that the enemy knows more about the value that we walk in than we do?
He knows.
Oh,
You know
because
what I'm
He know our
saying?
God. He know who our daddy is. That's who our spiritual daddy is. He knows. And so, we come from Him. And so that's why. Yeah. But, and Sarah, you said something, God dealt with me years ago, because I was that person like, I was cared about what other people said, so concerned about, what people thought. And I would go home, and cried and be like, Lord, did I do something wrong? And one day He was like, get up. He said, don't bring this before me anymore. And He asked me, he said, what makes people opinion about you correct?
Come on.
He said, it's what I think about you that matters, And so then it was during that time that He started to really work on me, you know what I'm saying? And so we really just, like you said, have to get to that point where we just like, what, God, I need You to show me who I am.
Yes.
He'll do just that. I remember, I got married About 3 months after I got saved, when I was 22 years old. So 3 months later, I got saved. And I was married in that marriage for 20 years. Before I was divorced, it was infidelity, what have you. But nevertheless, I would say maybe within the first few years, I realized in the heart of this marriage that I was married to the wrong person. And that's because I didn't know my self-worth going into it.
Right.
And that's what happens to a lot of people, get into things and, we ain't gonna even go there. But it's like finding myself in the midst of that because at the time I didn't know my worth. But as my relationship, as I begin to develop a relationship with God and find out who He is, I began to find out who I was. But then I wake up one day and like, oh my God, who am I married to? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
I actually do.
Yes.
Literally, right?
Yes.
And so many people find themselves in that state, But I, because I love God, I honor covenant, and I endured it. I endured it for 20 years or what have you. But, long story short, and we're not going to get into that yet. But, the Lord delivered me out of that situation, because He wants us to know who we are. And if we don't know who we are, how can we ever fulfill purpose?
We can't. Yeah.
And that's our very reason for being here in this earth realm. We're not here just to have a, picket fence, oh, I'm this and I'm that or whatever. We all have a divine purpose, from the foundation of the earth. And so, we need to know our worth. It's so important because it will dictate the direction that you go in life.
Right.
It's going to dictate the type of relationship that you find yourself in.
And what you'll accept. I think that's the biggest piece, because sometimes we get into relationships and we realize that, okay, there's all these great things and all of these not so great things, and we're always looking at the other person, but what is it about me that, number one, is attracted to this, and number two, that is attracting this?
Exactly.
So there's two parts of that coin. So if I truly knew who I am, if I know who I am, then there are going to be things that are going to come up and be like, not today.
Yes.
And be able to easily walk away from that because I know that this is not a covenant that I know that I can get in and stay in when that person is not valuing me the way that I know my Father God values me.
Yeah.
And like you said, there is grace for dealing with people who haven't come into the truth of who they are, so that they know how to treat you. But our response is our responsibility.
Yes.
That is so true.
So it's not their responsibility. It's their response is their responsibility. It's not ours. So it's really what we're bringing to the table. So I want to ask, was your father in your life, or did that have any bearings on the type of man that you were attracted to or that you accepted?
So my story is probably not unique to many. My father was in my life. My parents were divorced, I think, when I was maybe like 2, and he was the weekend dad. And I mean, when my father would show up, like as soon as I heard the wheels coming, I'm running to the door. Like he was everything to me. I would literally wrap around his leg, like, don't leave, Daddy. My father was everything. He was hilarious, very funny, just playful. And so when we were with him, it was just pure joy most of the time. But he was very honest about the pain that he felt in having the responsibility financially for my brother and I. And so there were some things that were said in my younger years that pretty much made me feel like, or my response to it was, I am not worth anything. So it was such a strange dynamic because it was like, well, you'll pick me up and you'll hug me and you'll love me, but then you'll tell me you'd really rather not be alive because you have to pay child support. And so as time went on and I became older, we got a little more distant. Some of it was geographically, just because we had moved around a lot. And some of it was just because it wasn't maybe legally mandated. And there were some great times he'd show up and he's there, and then he'd disappear. And I can remember one of the pinnacles of my questioning my own value was my 18th birthday. We went out to eat and he said, I'm so glad that I don't have to pay child support anymore. It has ruined my life and now I can live. And leaving that meeting, and this is the most G-rated version of all these kind of conversations I could have. You can't see yourself without Christ or any kind of revelation outside of that. You can't see yourself as valuable when your very own father will look at you and say, you know what? You really weren't worth the money or the time or the effort or the energy. And so he'd still pop in and out even after that. So I found myself with men that were double-minded, that one minute were like, Sarah, you are, the apple of my eye, girl, I'm gonna make you my wife and this and that, and then complain about the sacrifice or the value. So I went into my first marriage, that's a whole nother thing, but even after my divorce and meeting people, I had a predisposition that I won't be valuable and I won't be worth it. So, dysfunction and rejection is a very fuzzy lens that you begin to look at everything through. So even when good people show up, you can't see them because every missed text, forgotten phone call, side eye is you don't think I'm worth anything. Every relationship that doesn't work out because it maybe just really wasn't God's will, or maybe that person chose, that's debatable, you think it's because you're not worth it. So the number one thing I took away from my childhood was thinking that I wasn't valuable, I wasn't worth it, and I really would have been better had I not even been born. So, and then attracting someone that kind of repeats that behavior, hoping that someone will make the choice that you are worth it.
Yeah.
And so you don't even realize until the revelation of God's Spirit comes to you that you're really just looking for someone that thinks you're worthy of life.
Yeah.
And I've even struggled in my body with autoimmune disorders and all kinds of sicknesses, dealing with grief that I've been healed from now, totally medication free, that all can kind of be traced back psychologically to self-hatred.
Correct.
So that's just, I know that's heavy, but that's just a little introduction into some of what, shaped my mind and my view of myself. So I could be smiling and just preaching and doing TV and all these things and still going home feeling like I've never had a man love. I can tell you at 44 years old, I don't even really know that I've ever truly experienced the real love of a man.
That's real.
Not even the father of my 7 children. 14-year relationship, 12-year marriage, because I've never really seen that full and total acceptance, but the love of God.
Yes.
It is like, let me not finish it without putting that pin as I've reached for God and asked him to, because I want to know why I am the way I am. I want to know, why do I cry about this guy? Or why did I, go through this? Or why did I tolerate this? Because I was even in abusive relationships from 14 years old and all types of different types of abuse and experienced so many different types of abuse. Why? Because you're looking for that acceptance. And when you really understand the you can't even understand it. It's unfathomable. It's a paradox to try to say you can understand the love of God that truly looks at you in your worst state and loves you completely and totally. Before you knew Christ, even the mistakes, I know, y'all may be better than me, but I've made some mistakes after Christ. And to see, I'll lay in bed at night sometimes praying and say, you still love me. And when you get that kind of breakthrough in your personal relationship with God, there's a place you get to in confidence that's beyond this world.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
It's like, listen, I have a father and I can pray for my father and I understand that he gave me what he had available.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I think that's the biggest pivotal part of knowing you when you've stepped into a place of spiritual maturity is when you can look at that person that their behavior in the beginning sent your life on a trajectory that was not necessarily the way that it was intended to go, but all things work together, right?
Yes.
When you can really love that person and start to feel compassion for that person and understand that at the time that was the best that they had to give.
Yes.
Regardless of what the situation was. We don't know what their childhood was like or none of that. None of that really, it matters, but it doesn't matter. But when you can get to that point where you can truly have compassion for a person that has caused you some type of trauma, that's when we know our relationship with God is so much bigger than anything. So was your father in your life? Did you come up with a dad in your life?
I did.
Awesome.
I did. And I just want to say something to that. It's so important that we understand that. We don't always really know how to forgive at times, but God will give us that grace just to to let it go or what have you. And so one of the things that the Lord would have me do was He had me to go back and look at how my dad was raised.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go back and see, you know, and it's generational.
Yeah.
You'll find, you know, that his father wasn't there and his father wasn't there, you know, his grandfather, it's just crazy, but it's generational.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, my dad, he was there. He was a wonderful man. My dad absolutely loved me. I absolutely was crazy about him like he was there. And I tell you, but what happened for me was, he and my mom was married 22 years, and I actually caught my father with another woman, my brother and I.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and that other woman was a friend of the family. And she had been over our house, and, you know, it was just, you know, so it was devastating. And I had to be the one to tell my mom. I had a anxiety attack one particular night. It was just crazy how it was me, my brother, and my sister at home, and I just lost it. Like my cousin, we worked at a particular restaurant, and my cousin called me. He said, "Would you believe they wouldn't give us a 10-cent raise?" And from that little information, I lost it. Like I just got to hollering and screaming. It's like I was carrying all this weight. It was so much, you know, because my mom was a great woman, and she would leave. She had this crazy schedule where she would work 5 o'clock in the afternoon and get off at 2 o'clock in the morning. But soon as she left for work, my dad would jump in the shower, leave, and he would come back, you know, like half an hour before she got home, flopped on the couch, lit up a cigarette like he'd been there all day. And he would start arguments on her off days so he can leave. And it was so heavy.
Wow.
Like I carried that. And so one day I just lost it. And it just so happened this particular night when I lost it, my mom came home from work early. Like it was like minutes after I got into this, you know, thing. And she, even to the day, she said she's like smacked me, or she was like, snap out of it, you know, what is it? But I've always been that child that, even though I'm the baby of 3 children, I've always been like that strong one, you know. And so she told me, she said, I knew that you was getting ready to tell me something that would just change my life forever. She said, because I was never used to seeing you like this ever. And she said, she looked at me and she said, whatever it is, tell me. And I had to tell her. I mean, it was just, you know, it was devastating. And so my dad ended up leaving, and he ended up leaving and going to be with this other woman and raising her family. And so, you know, that brought about rejection, abandonment, anger. I mean, I went years without speaking to my dad. I mean, I was, and, you know, when I heard, if I was somewhere or my family member's house and I heard he was coming, I would get up and leave. And I knew that I was like breaking his heart because he was crazy about me or whatever. But I did it on purpose. I wanted to hurt him just like he hurt us or what have you. And so, but it came a time when the day I got saved, September the 10th, 1995, I got saved. And I remember, I had never praised God a day in my life. The Lord just, you know, had me go to church, and I ended up getting saved that day, and my father was the first person that I called.
Wow.
And I tell you, I cried, he cried, and I was like, Dad, I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in or whatever. I said, I forgive you. And I'm telling you, from that moment forward, we reestablished our relationship. And I'm so glad because I actually lost him at 56 years old.
Wow.
He was young when he passed away, and even now I think about saying, Lord, I just thank you for your grace, because you knew. Had I held on to that anger, that bitterness, and what have you, and not forgiven him, you know, that thing would have went to the grave.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That is so good. That's so good. I didn't meet my dad until I was 30, but the time that we had, and I lost him a couple of months ago, but the time we had, it wasn't a lot of quantity, but it was quality.
Yes.
Like it was quality time. But I found myself early on, before I got a chance to meet him, almost looking at God through the eyes of what I looked at from my father. Like my dad only wanted me whenever him and my mom were together. Like, so whenever they would try to rekindle, then he would get in touch with me. You know what I'm saying? And that was the only time that I was any value to him, is when it was a unit, right? But when I got to a certain age, I realized my parents are only 14 years older than me. What would I do with a kid at 14? I was like, thank you, God, for saving me from being around. You know, so I started looking at how God had protected me from what could have happened, or what could have, you know, those things, and looking at it from that way. But then going back and saying, my Father God is not like my earthly father.
Yes.
You know, my Father God, He is my acceptance. He is my
Yes.
security. He is what makes me significant.
Yes.
You know, if I'm significant and important and valuable to him, it doesn't matter what people think.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, and it was so much easier for me to deal with, I say rejection, because I look at rejection as
Yeah.
protection now.
Mhm.
It hasn't always been that way.
Right.
But now I do. And now I look at it when you get ready to step into the covenant of marriage, if you come into that space with daddy issues, then you're either looking for a father figure in the man,
Mhm.
and when he doesn't fulfill what you feel like you need, then, you know, now it's like push back from that.
Yes.
Or you are in this space and you are just accepting anything that he gives so that he won't leave, right? So,
I've
I mean,
been
it's
there.
the same thing, you know, like daddy don't leave. And then to think, you know, that value. So we're wrapping up here, but what would you say to a person that was getting ready to step into that space and happened to realize, wait a minute, how would they know that they have daddy issues?
Well, again, I think one of the main things is they find themselves accepting things, like you said, accepting things that they know, you know, is beneath them. You know, we tend to do that when you have these quote unquote daddy issues. You know what you're receiving, you know, is not what you should be receiving, and you know deep down inside you deserve better. You know, but yet. You can't understand why, you know, you don't understand why am I doing this or what have you. And so, yeah, I would definitely say it's not time.
Okay.
It's not time.
I think the biggest thing that I've learned from personal experience is that you want to pull something from them that you just can't seem to get. It's like a dry well, and you think that maybe they're deficient, and then you got to realize that, like, wait, they don't have that to give me. And when you get that revelation, and I'm so grateful I finally got that one, that it's like, I got to be okay with God and look at the joy of another person being added to my life, but not need the person.
Right.
That's good.
And understand, one thing that as I've been preparing for marriage, and I know I'm headed towards that season, not in a relationship now, but no, it's coming in my spirit. God keeps asking me, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? So your identity, you know, knowing that you're getting healed from it, it's when your identity comes from God and not if that man loves you. And when your sense of wholeness and satisfaction and fulfillment comes from God, and that you're able to bring a satisfied soul to a relationship instead of coming as a dissatisfied soul looking for that person to fill you up.
Yeah, that's good.
That is awesome.
That's good.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. The knowledge that you bring, the experience that you bring, the transparency that you bring. Thank you so much for that. And I mean, this has been an amazing conversation, and I pray that you guys start having these conversations at home and, you know, get into a space where you start really looking at what it is that you're bringing to the table instead of looking at what somebody else can bring. If you want more information either by myself or by the host the guest that we have here, you can find me at Taffany.com, and there's a tab there where you'll be able to find out more about each one of our guests. Well, that's all we have for today, but I hope that something was said that brings you closer to a healthy relationship that you desire. And I look forward to spending more time with you. And until we meet the next time, don't just be a hearer, but be a doer. And in that doing, realize that after all, you are the only common denominator in every relationship that you're in. See you later.
I'm walking around with my head held high. I'm walking around with my head held high. You know what? You know what? My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. They on the other side. I'm walking around with my head held high. I'm walking around with my head held high. You know what? You know what? My dreams are reach. I can see those lights. My dreams are reach. I can see